Breath of Fire was an ambitious first attempt by Capcom to break into the RPG genre. While not groundbreaking even for the time, it set the foundation for what the rest of the series would become. Breath of Fire was a bit rough around the edges, but like any great series, it needs to start somewhere. And like Final Fantasy before it, Breath of Fire was a stepping stone the series used to evolve into the series many gamers treasure today. The Breath of Fire series would not only build upon the foundation of its ambitious first entry, but use it to shape so many of its core ideas fans have come to love. It's within this lens I want to look at the game and analyze the lore, gameplay, mythology, and philosophical ideas which would all become integral parts of the series' identity. Just because the story is simple doesn't mean it can't have a powerful message to tell. While Breath of Fire won't be a game I look back on years later reminiscing about the time I had with it, what time I spent with it was quite fun, and I look forward to seeing how this ambitious first entry blossoms into something truly spectacular in later entries of the series. So join me in a fight against the Dark Dragon clan as we strive to bring peace to the world in our Breath of Fire retrospective and story analysis. There's little development history on the original Breath of Fire game, but what we do know is planning for Breath of Fire began when Capcom decided to branch out a bit and step away from the action-oriented combat games they'd garnered mainstream success for, such as Street Fighter and Mega Man. While reception for Breath of Fire was overall positive, many pointed to its plot for lacking any sort of depth. Even for the time, it didn't really have any depth as, say, something like Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest had evolved from their more basic plots into something much more ambitious. Breath of Fire's development team was made up of Yoshinori Kawano, Yoshinori Takanaka, and Makoto Ikehara as game designers. Tokuro Fujiwara of Ghosts and Goblins fame was selected as producer, and Tetsuya Yoshikawa was selected as game designer, with early art being done by Kenji Ifune of Mega Man fame. The composing team would be made up of Yasuaki Fujita, Mari Yamaguchi, Mine Fuji, Yoko Shimamura, and Tatsuya Nishimura composing the soundtrack. The father of Mega Man, Kenji Inafune, was also credited as character designer. He was initially tasked with creating the characters of Breath of Fire, but was eventually moved off the project and replaced with Tatsuya Yoshikawa. He said in an interview, "My boss at the time really didn't like them, so he took me off the project, and the person he put in the project who had just joined the company was very talented artist." Yoshikawa redid the character designs originally created by Inafune. Kenji Inafune would go on to say he was very respectful of my original character designs and left those in his newly redesigned character designs for the game. Yoshikawa and Inafune would both go on to have legendary careers within the video game industry, with Inafune continuing to grow the Mega Man brand and Yoshikawa designing characters for the widely popular Devil May Cry series. Despite sticking it out, Inafune was deeply wounded by being removed from the project, saying, "It really injured my pride when my boss told me I don't like your designs." Imagine pouring your heart and soul into designing these characters only to be told by your boss he doesn't like your designs. Perhaps they didn't fit the vision he had for the game, or perhaps his boss just had one giant dislike in the actual design. Despite that, it was nice to see Inafune stick it out, using this opportunity as a time to grow. Breath of Fire and its sequel Breath of Fire 2 would eventually be ported to the Game Boy Advance with new character portraits and a slew of other improvements. Despite those improvements, these are often considered inferior versions due to the color palette being considered a downgrade from the SNES versions and the music altered to fit the Game Boy Advance's sound chip. It's the Game Boy Advance version we are taking a look at, with a ROM hack restoring the color palette and the music to its original. Mari Yamaguchi, Yasuaki Fujita, and Mine Fuji, as far as I can tell, no longer compose music in the industry anymore, with Mega Man 10 being the last game they composed. Credit where credit is due though, one of the developers really hit off some bangers. Disney's Magical Quest starring Mickey Mouse is one of my personal favorites. Perhaps the most prolific out of these composers, though, is Yoko Shimamura. She became known for her work on the Kingdom Hearts franchise and Final Fantasy XV, but got her start at Capcom. I feel like most people forget her time at Capcom, even forgetting she helped bring the soundtrack of Street Fighter II to life, with Guile themes being one of her standout tracks from that title. Legend tells of a time long past. The dragon clans of the world were locked in a bitter war. Tyr, the goddess of desire, offered to grant the winning dragon clan any wish their heart desired. The war raged on as the dragon clans fought mercilessly to gain the favor of the goddess. The war brought the world to its knees as it sat on the brink of destruction. When all hope had been lost, a lone warrior from the Light Dragon clan stood up against the destruction by challenging the goddess herself, accompanied by 6 companions. He sealed the goddess away using 6 keys and scattering them across the world. The war was over, and a new era of peace had begun. However, the Dark Dragons still began to hunt down their remaining adversaries, the Light Dragons, who'd given up their dragon powers and sealed them away. A young orphan named Ryu was raised by his sister Sarah, a priestess capable of wielding powerful magic. A dragon appears to Ryu, warning him of an incoming threat. As Ryu awakes from his slumber, he is immediately alerted to evacuate the house as the Dark Dragon clan has set out to destroy the town of Drogon. Sarah, in a last-ditch attempt to save the clan, knowing full well the Light Dragon clan is in no position to fight the Dark Dragons, petrifies the rest of the villagers. She tells Ryu to be brave when he awakens. The world will need him. She takes on the leader of the Dark Dragon army, Jade, by herself, eventually surrenders and goes with him after learning they hold all 6 of the goddess keys. An unknown amount of time has passed since Sarah has petrified the rest of the clan. Once they awaken from petrification, Ryu decides to go and face the Dark Clan alone and find Sarah. They give him 300 GP and send him on his way. Ryu heads to the next city over, called Camlan. Breath of Fire, like many RPGs of the 90s, featured an overworld connecting towns and dungeons together. Accompanied by that overworld are the many dreaded random encounters. The SNES version of Breath of Fire is notorious for its very frequent random encounters. This was one of the major fixes the GBA port set out to fix. Combat in Breath of Fire is turn-based, following the same basic formula as many RPGs of the same genre. Breath of Fire's battle menu follows the same basic commands of the genre. You got the attack option, which allows you to deal physical damage with your equipped weapon, spells allowing characters to use magic they've learned over the course of leveling up. Items allows a character to use one of many consumable items in the party inventory. The other option available to each participant is Run, letting a character escape from battle. By pressing right on the D-pad, one can select the Defend option, decreasing the damage a character receives from an attack. Auto will set your character to auto attack mode. Ryu's Dragon ability and Karn's Simulation ability play out slightly different than traditional spells and abilities. Upon progressing through the game, Ryu will come across Dragon Shrines. These are different from the traditional save points littered throughout the game. Upon entering, he will be given an option to test his strength. Successfully doing so and defeating the monster inside will give him access to different dragon forms to use in battle. Think of these as basic magic skills. There are high and low end dragon forms increasing in strength with each new form. Selecting one in battle will transform Ryu into a dragon. He will remain a dragon until the end of battle, or you dismiss his dragon form manually. Karn, on the other hand, has the unique ability to mold certain party members together. This gives each form a unique style in how they fight. It also increases Karn's stats quite a bit, which was quite surprising to me. It's also worth noting Karn retains his forms after battle. You can also select a form outside of battle for added benefits on the field, but we'll cover these for later on. For now, let's head to the city of Camlan. Breath of Fire does require a little bit of grinding from time to time. While it's not required here, it's probably in your best interest to level up Ryu a bit and upgrade his equipment, since it's going to be some time before you find your second party member. While leveling up seems to happen at a fairly frequent pace, it's the amount of GP or currency the monsters drop you don't get a whole lot of. Your tolerance for this is going to depend on how accustomed you are to grinding. I consider it to be par for the course at this point, as it just adds to the old school JRPG charm, but if grinding isn't your thing, just know you're going to have to overcome it by Breath of Fire's very old school feel in this regard. The town of Camlan has also been destroyed by the Dark Dragons. What once looked like a small peaceful village turned to ruin. Monsters roam the castle, dethroning the king and taking over his throne. The castle guards are unable to defeat the monsters inside due to them being too strong. There is nothing our homeboy Ryu can't handle though. With the sword clenched in hand, he charges the castle, ready to slay the monsters and bring peace back to Camlan. I was expecting the first real dungeon to be really difficult with Ryu in my party, but surprisingly it wasn't that bad. Breath of Fire is extremely generous in giving you herbs and medicine needed to cure status effects. Not only are these consumables often very useful and abundant, there is also quite a lot of great equipment you can find in treasure chests. It benefits you to uncover every nook and cranny of a dungeon. Surprisingly, Breath of Fire does an extremely good job at rewarding you for going out of your way to explore. Nothing irritates me more in a game than going out of my way to explore only to have nothing to collect. On top of the healing items, dungeons will also have springs or fountains you can drink from to replenish your HP. So as long as you're mindful of your HP and how much damage enemies are doing, you can very effectively grind in this area to your heart's content. The environments, sprite details, and animation here are really good too, especially for its time. A great deal of care went into designing the monsters. I found myself constantly awed by the amount of animation they put in the way of enemies moving in battle. I'd argue the Final Fantasy franchise has more creative and vibrant creature designs, but let it be known, Capcom was really out here giving Final Fantasy and Dragon Quest a run for their money when it came to monster designs. Ryu makes his way up to the throne room of Camelon. Sitting on the king's throne is a giant toad, our first real boss fight of the game. The toad goes down pretty quickly, nothing a few whacks from Ryu's sword and a couple of herbs can't handle. Breath of Fire's combat overall isn't really hard, and this became a common theme throughout this game as we progress through the game. Just know if you're looking for a challenging old-school RPG, you're not going to find it in Breath of Fire. I have heard the SNES version is harder, so this is something to keep in mind when choosing the version you're looking to play, as I did choose to go with the Game Boy Advance version. After defeating the toad, the king realizes we are the true hero of legend and tasks us with stopping the earthquakes plaguing the land. Ryu heads to the town of Nanai, where the tower housing the earthquake device sits. In order to sneak into Nanai, we need to wait until the dead of night. Sneaking in at night, there are some guards that will be sleeping. However, there are still some who are patrolling the town. Ryu can easily sneak past the guards sleeping, but can still be caught by other guards patrolling. Staying a safe distance away from them, we can sneak our way into the castle and make our way to the basement of Nanai Castle. Ryu makes it to the basement where the Dark Dragon Commander is controlling the device, creating the earthquakes. After a quick fight with the commander, Ryu pulls the key from the pillar, acquiring the Earth Key, one of the 6 goddess keys Jade was looking for at the beginning of the game. However, pulling the Earth Key from the device destroys Nanai, leaving the kingdom in ruins. The King of Camelon sends his visor to find us and takes us back to the castle, telling Ryu despite Nanai falling it was necessary to save the world. Damn, are we really the good guys here? He tells us to head to the east, making our way to the Kingdom of Windland, home of the winged bird people. Upon entering Windland, we immediately learn the king is ill. The wizard has put a curse on him. His state is weakening, and in order to find a cure, we'll need to climb Karma Tower and find the only herb capable of healing the king. The Princess of Windland, Nina, wishes her mother well and goes off to the tower to find the herb. We are now in control of Nina. To make our way to Karma Tower, we need to make our way through Aura Cave, pass through Romero, and through the forest. Accompanying Nina are a couple of Windland soldiers posted outside of Aura Cave. Passing through Romero, Nina discovers the young girls have been rounded up by the wizard and taken to Karma Tower to be experimented on by his magic. The town of Romero has also been plagued by the wizard. Vegetation cannot grow, and the dead roam the village at night. It just occurred to me why this town was called Romero. The name was clearly inspired by famous director John Romero, and if you know anything about the localizer Ted Woolsey, you'll know he has an obsession with pop references in early SNES games, so this makes a lot of sense. Since we can do nothing to lift the curse, let's head through the forest to Karma Tower. After a quick trek through the forest, Nina and the 2 soldiers find themselves at Karma Tower. This is another fairly straightforward dungeon. Since we only have 1 functioning party member, it's not too hard. Nina can cast white magic and buff the party when needed. The few fountains sprinkled within also make for some easy healing, and we even have a save point here. Nina reaches the top of the tower, freeing the young girls of Romero from the clutches of the wizard. The last thing we need to do is make our way to where the herb rests, right at the heart where the wizard's lab is. Upon entering the lab, Nina is immediately incapacitated because of the poisonous gas to bird folks. One of the soldiers manages to escape, turn into a bird, and fly back to Windland to let them know the princess has been captured. They ask Ryu, who is napping, if he can save the princess since the gas has no effect on him because he's part dragon. Ryu catches a ride on one of the soldiers as he morphs into a bird and flies to the roof of Karma Tower. Once Ryu makes his way to the wizard's lab, we can confront him in a fight, save Nina, and acquire the herb needed to save the king. Since we have the herb, Nina and Ryu return to Windland to give it to the king. Once the king recovers, he thanks his daughter and Ryu for saving him, telling Ryu he must use the bridge passing through Windland Castle. Nina decides to accompany Ryu on his journey. Off to the east is a stone golem, but for now we need to head to the 2 towns centered across from each other, Tuntar and Tuntar. Upon arriving, we quickly learn the two towns have water flowing down the river, but since the Dark Dragons have placed a giant boulder where the river flows, no water is coming to the towns. The Dark Dragons are after an object located in the two villages. They promise if they give up the item, they will remove the boulder. However, the mayor of Tantar isn't too keen on doing so, but the mayor of Tantar wishes to give it over. Talking with a few of his townfolks, we can learn the mayor hasn't been acting himself lately. Eventually learning that Bo, a resident of Tantar, has gone to the Forest of Despair in search for something. Ryu and Nina make their way into the forest and stumble across a fortress occupied by the Dark Dragons. Fighting their way through waves of monsters and soldiers, we discover the mayor has been held up here the whole time, meaning the one back in Tantar was a doppelganger. He quickly tells us to grab the weapons from soldiers stashed there and proceeds to lock us in his cell. This is why we don't trust strangers, kids. After a fight with monsters, Bo appears, shoots a switch, releasing us from prison, and after a quick fight with the commander posing as the mayor, Bo tells us while we were distracted, he had snuck around back and freed up the real mayor. So with that, it's time to make our way back to Tantar. It's now time we move that pesky boulder blocking the river. In order to do so, however, we're going to need to use that stone golem. However, we need a key to the golem. It's time to head back to Romero, where there's this floating castle just above the lake called Agua. Before we can enter again, though, we are going to need some sort of way to lift the curse in Romero. With Bo in our party, we can easily traverse the world map by placing him as party leader. If Bo is the leader, he can walk through trees on the world map. Alternatively, Karn can do this as well in his Shin form, but since we don't have access to Karn or this form, we're going to need to use Bo. Off to south of Romero is a cave with fresh water in it. The water is able to lift the curse plaguing Romero. In order to grab the water, though, we'll need a jug to put it in. Returning at night, there is an old lady and her zombified husband standing in the graveyard. Talking to them, we can grab a water jar, fill it up with water from the cave. Spilling the water on the soil of Romero will remove the curse and rid the town of zombies. The mayor of Romero gives us a tablet, which we can now use to get into Agua Tower and climb inside. Bo, Ryu, and Nina make their way to the top of Agua Tower, fighting the Wisp guarding the key. With the king key obtained, they can finally use the golem to move a rock blocking the river. Inside of the Dark Dragons are waiting for the golem, demanding they give them the key. After a fight with the commander, they use the key to activate the golem, restoring water to Tantar and Tantar. The mayor of Tantar asks us to find the item the Dark Dragons were after. We make our way to the lakeside cave, obtain the item, and make our way back to Tantar. Upon returning, the two children of the mayors have set their wedding up and we are asked to attend. It's time for a celebration as the river's been restored and the two villages united. But the celebration is cut short as the commander from earlier on is alive and well and activates the golem to destroy the city of Tantar. Ryu, Nina, and Bo immediately enter the golem, who refuses to respond to the commander's moves as if it's bothered by what it just did. Making our way inside, we are able to defeat the general. Oddly enough, this was one of the boss fights in the game I really struggled with. He has a devastating attack which hits all party members at once. It doesn't help he has a butt ton of HP either. The golem, with its self-conscious and heart of gold, sacrifices itself as it marches headfirst into the fires of Mount Doom, causing the lava to cool down the water below, making a bridge for us to cross to the south below. If we continue our journey, we're going to need a ship. We'll need to visit the town of Aria and talk to the mayor about borrowing one. Before we can, however, we need to head south and stumble across a dragon shrine. This shrine is a bit different from the ones that we're using to save our game. Here, Ryu can accept a challenge alone and engage in a fight to test his skills to acquire the ability to transform into a dragon during battle. We've covered this in our battle section already, so let's move on to Aria, the city made of gold. Immediately after entering Aria, Ryu, Nina, and Bo are accused of stealing the treasure from Aria and tossed into the prison. Talking to the man sleeping in the bed, we're able to get out. We're going to need to avoid the guard and be careful of what treasure chests we open, but feel free to explore the village. Taking time to talk to the mayor, we discover his daughter is locked in a safe in the basement, and like clockwork, the mayor has been told if he wants to see his daughter safe, he needs to surrender the light key. He begs us to pick the lock and save his daughter, but we don't have any way of doing so. I smell another party member joining in our future. We need to make haste to the town of Bleak up north. We can check the stores and discover one of the merchants is selling a gold bar. This sucker is super expensive, but we need it to progress the story. We can spend some time raiding the dressers of residents of Aria. We can find some money and a gold tiara we can sell. The last thing we need to do for more money is talk to the lady in the village who tells us her son went to the forest up north and hasn't come back. If we make our way to the forest up north, we learn that her son has been cutting trees and the fairies of the forest weren't too happy with him. They decided to imprison him by making him walk constant crop circles in the forest. I'd spent a hot minute trying to figure out what to actually do here because no matter how many times I tried to talk to the fairy and him, I couldn't get them to release him. After about a half hour of traveling back and forth from Aria, progressing forward a bit, and returning here to have the same thing happen again, I caved and looked up a walkthrough. I usually will use a walkthrough as an outline for these retrospectives to make sure there isn't any side content that could add to the story, but I try not to use them to solve puzzles or figure out what to do. Even a walkthrough didn't tell me anything different than I was already trying to do. It was at this point something clicked with me. What era was Breath of Fire made in? That one question immediately switched my mind in old school mode. Most RPGs of this era don't hold your hand. They didn't tell you where to go whenever you talked to an important NPC. No, most of the time you had to deduce that for yourself by asking townsfolk, not only to give you advice on where to go, but oftentimes were required to talk to in order to move events along. It was within talking to an NPC in Aria I discovered the solution. Talking to his mother yet again triggers one line of dialogue from his mother telling us to go rescue him. Turns out this was all I needed to do in order to free the poor guy from a lifetime of making crop circles in the forest. Love or hate design choices like this, it reminds you of a time when games weren't so handholdy and let you figure things out for yourself. With her son rescued, she gives us some more gold, giving us just enough alongside selling the gold tiara to buy that pesky gold brick. If you don't have enough though, you are going to grind, so have fun. Heading east, we can make our way through Bleak Cave, and oh boy, you'd better stock up on healing items and make sure Nina has MP. These bulls in this dungeon can one-shot an entire group if you're not careful. After trekking through Bleak Cave, we arrive at the other end. A lighthouse sits just outside the cave, and we can see the town of Bleak just a few random encounters away from where we stand. Talking to the mayor of Bleak, he tells us a man named Karn went to Crypt, a dungeon in the South Desert. However, in order to stop the winds, we need the icicle. Good thing we bought that gold bar from earlier, huh? He will give us it in place of the gold bar. With the icicle in our grasp, we can make our way through the cave and find ourselves in the desert. Crypt lies to the south, blocked by quicksand, so we'll need to find a way to cross the quicksand. Lucky for us, we can head to a village and talk to the mayor. At this point, Ryu's politician persuasion skills have to be maxed out. Pretty sure he might just be able to talk to the Emperor of the Dark Dragon at this point and end the war. The mayor tells us if we defeat the sandworm eating their goats, he will give us a magical flute summoning a bridge across the quicksand. Making our way through the crypt, we meet up with Karn, make our way back to Aria, and once we pick the lock, the mayor's daughter is mad at her dad for planning to give up the light key so easily. If only her late mother were here, she might be able to talk her dad out of giving up the light key. We make a quick trek back through Bleak Cave with Karn in our party. He can unlock doors inside, and one of these doors nets us another gold brick. You guessed it, we're going to need it to progress through the story. At least we don't have to buy one this go. We can head into the lighthouse, acquire the dark key, and get a mirror to see the dead. Talking with the mayor, his late wife appears, convincing him not to give the keys to the dragon. We can make our way back to the safe, climb the tower, and find the light key. With our ship now in possession, we can finally sail the seas, but the Dark Dragon clan shows up and destroys the ship. It's decided we are going to sneak into their base and commandeer a ship for us to use. Joining us on this journey here is our little fish gold friend Gobi. He wants the gold bar, and the little merchant friend of ours is a greedy little asshole. After fighting our way through hordes of soldiers, we finally have our ship. We won't sail it for long though, as the Dark Dragon clan shows up and destroys it. Gobi creates a huge cyclone in the ocean, causing the party to wash up on a lone island. They'll need to go to Prima, but in order to achieve this, we'll need a way to breathe underwater. Gobi volunteers to go to Prima, his hometown, to obtain gills for a price, of course. Arriving at the Merchants Guild in Prima, we learn the Ox people of Gant haven't been able to send supplies to them. Amongst those supplies are the gills, which Gobi needs. We learn that the young men of Gaunt were imprisoned by the Dark Dragons. The old man in Gaunt asks us if we can take the supplies to Prima for him. Inside are the gills and a letter explaining that Gaunt has been attacked by the Dark Dragons. The guild master is alerted that a ship has been attacked, and on the ship was an ox named, well, Ox. That's original. The Grim Reaper appears trying to take him to the afterlife, but we need information out of him. So we decide to go get Ryu to face off against the Grim Reaper. Gobi makes his way to the island, giving the gills to Ryu, asking him to help Ox. Returning to Prima, we're able to defeat the Grim Reaper, and soon after Ox joins us. Ox has the unique ability to destroy walls and rocks, so he will come in handy. We also need to obtain Kar's first simulation ability by morphing Gobi and Bo into one. This gives him the ability to walk through trees and do a shit ton of damage. Ox tells us there is a secret weapon being developed by the Dark Dragons at Noble Castle. They've also taken the young men of Gaunt into this castle. Looks like we have our next destination lined up. Making our way through Noble Castle, we can defeat the dragons and rescue the men of Gaunt and Ox's wife, but learn from them the secret weapon that they were developing was a device capable of attacking Prima, something they were unable to do previously. We'll need to be able to find a way to save Prima. To do so, let's make our way to this town of Wisdom. Inside Noble Castle, the old man tells us we'll need a statue to enter Wisdom. With the statue in our possession, we can make our way into the chambers where the sorceress sleeps and awake her, recruiting her to help us save Prima. After fighting her 4 guardians, the sorceress tells us in order to sink the boats to the Dark Dragon, we need to awaken Typhoon. She gives us an old egg, telling us to put it somewhere really warm. There was a volcano underwater by Prima. Perhaps we could use that. Once the egg is dropped inside, Typhoon is ready for summoning. We make our way back to Wisdom, and the sorceress Blue joins us. We head back to Prima to join the fish people to stop the Dark Dragons from invading. Thanks to Blue summoning Typhoon, we're able to push them back and hold them off of the ocean floor. Meanwhile, the Emperor of the Dragon Clan is not too happy the Light Dragons keep on interfering with the search for the Goddess Keys. He wants them back and Jade to stop them from obtaining any more. Jade recruits the help of his 4 generals. That's what I'm going to call them anyways. Goda, Searle, Moat, and Court to stop us. Back in Prima, the party thanks Gobi and is acknowledged for his bravery, giving him the ability to turn into a fish. Turning Gobi into fish form, we can freely swim underwater and avoid random encounters. Nice! These enemies underwater have been a thorn in my side since we first entered. It sure would have been nice to be able to warp to Prima at any time we wanted, as it's just a pain in the ass to go to Gaunt every time we want to make our way to the ocean floor. So at least this one little step helps out just a little bit. Our next stop is a town called Gust. The residents have been driven crazy ever since the strange flower appeared. The Dark Dragon Clan destroyed the bridge heading west of Gust because of course they did. But the man who's going to fix it has been held up in the laboratory by Court. Making our way through the cave near Gust, we find the entrance to the lab and confront Court. He summons a monster to fight against us. After a rather tough boss fight, Court escapes, mentions the flower was created by him to drive the people mad and turn them into monsters. The monsters we just fought was a man from the village of Gust. On the verge of death, we haul him out and Blue attempts to heal him, but he needs an oil of sorts to do so. She temporarily leaves the party to stay with Nikolai, the man we just rescued, as we hunt down the oil she needs. Heading to the west cave, we can find and defeat a golden fly, take this dead body with us, and then make our way to a frog cave in order to exchange it for oil. Blue heals Nikolai's wounds. Our next objective is to defeat the flower, and Court is not too happy we've shown up to do so. With a few good whacks, we are able to stop it and restore the people of Gust back to normal. Returning to Gust, however, it seems we were not able to revert Nikolai from his monster form, so he reverts back to that state and begins attacking his wife. After a fight with him, Nikolai is able to return to himself and offers to fix the bridge for us in return. We can now cross, but before we can do so, Court shows up, we pulverize him, and this time destroy him for good. Our next destination is a small mole town hidden, called Grimoire, underground and the location of our last party member Mogu. The poor little mole has lost his will to go on. He stood up against the Dark Dragons and lost, losing his courage. Haunted by his nightmares, we need to find a way to enter his dreams and restore his will to live. In order to do this, we need to make our way to a village called Tunlin and acquire an item called the Bolster. In order to acquire the Bolster, we need to be able to talk to the people of Tunlin. Since they speak in the language of music, we're going to need to acquire an item called the Maestro. In order to find the Maestro, we need to talk to an old man in Gust. Once we have it in our possession, we can finally talk to the people of Tunlin. Turns out their princess has become obsessed with the idea of eternal youth, and Jade has promised if she marries him, he will grant her eternal youth, so she has no desire to give us the key to where the safe lies. However, her visor is upset she's even considering this, as she sees right through the lies Jade is telling her. Since we can't talk sense into the princess, she concocts a plan to open the safe anyway. While she bathes, we can stare at her back and get the key to the safe. However, we are caught and almost thrown into the dungeon, but an explosion from Blue opens up the safe, letting us get a hold of the bolster. The explosion takes the princess by surprise, sending her into shock. Missing from the vault, though, is the time key. And this is all thanks to, well, another general we'll be facing soon, named Searle. With the bolster in our possession, it's time we return to Grimoire and save poor Mogu. Activating the bolster, we can enter Mogu's dreams. Moat has screwed with him badly. His courage has gone missing, and without it, he can't muster up the courage to pull himself back together and stand up against the dark dragons. Making our way through the tower, we can encounter a boss, but there's no way to defeat the boss until we find Mogu's courage. This dungeon, however, is one giant royal pain in the ass. Amongst the floors are red and blue tiles. Stepping on them will make walls disappear. This room already effectively acts as a maze, but with this, you now have to rely on finding the right crevice to get through the wall. But you can't see it, making it extremely difficult to do so. I spent so much time in this dungeon, I about lost my damn mind. The amount of random encounters I got into this dungeon was just nuts, all because I couldn't find my way through. Sad part about it is it requires you to go through this dungeon twice. Upon entering the village is a mole who is blocking the entrance. She tells us they found courage. She is in a small cave to the south, but in order to find it, we need to pass through the gas fields. After a quick trip through the gas fields, we finally find courage, and the rest of Mogu's personality comes together. In a cute little montage, they each have a message of encouragement to give to Courage before ultimately his personalities join together. Once Mogu's personalities are united, we can make our way through the tower again and defeat the bosses and head back to the real world. Mogu awakens and joins the party as they continue to fight against the dark dragons. The party makes their way to the village of Spring, which has been taken over by an endless winter thanks to the sky key being removed. Making our way to the top of the tower, Moat appears and wisps us away into his dreams. This is another one of those sections with a filled tower. We need to make our way through, climb to the top, defeat Moat, and in doing so we can save Spring and acquire this sky key. The last and final village we need to visit is Carmen, a city frozen in time thanks to the work of Searle. To find Searle, we need to climb the Tower of Talk, where the time key must go. A giant black hole appears showing Carmen frozen in time. However, there is one man who isn't frozen, a man named Alan. Searle seems to recognize him. The party splits up as Ryu makes his way back to Carmen and reunites with the rest of the party. Bo is able to deduce Alan and Searle know each other. Alan heads to Talk Tower to investigate what's going on. Of course, we've decided to follow him. Alan tries to talk sense into Searle but is unable to do so after engaging in a fight. Searle threatens the party and continues she will erase Carmen from time. Eventually, time gets compressed and Searle warps everybody to a castle in the south, sealing herself inside. It seems Alan has had some effect on her. However, Alan is seriously hurt because of Searle. He reveals he and her grew up together, but they threw her out of the village once they found out she wasn't a human. We can take Alan to the castle and make our way inside. We get a heartfelt moment with Searle and Alan as both of them disappear, never to be seen again. We can make our way up Talk Tower to restore the key, and doing so sucks us into a time portal yet again itself. Well, we all go back to the village, but now Nina is missing. Somehow, Nina ended up in Tunland with amnesia. In order to save her, we must first talk to a doctor in Carmen who tells us to concoct a potion to reverse amnesia. We need a white antler, which we should have for multiple deers we've killed, or we can get one in Aria, the poison fish, which can be found in the dirty water near Scand, which we need to go through the castle we just got through in order to find, a sea nut, whatever the hell that is, on a tree near Tunland, and a root needed near Grimoire. Once we have it, we return to Carmen, get the potion, head back to Tunland, and give it to Nina, restoring her memory. Nina can now fly, letting us go anywhere on the world map. Before we wrap up this small section, I do have a couple of thoughts on the story. While I thoroughly enjoyed the story of Mogu, these added stories of Nikolai and Alan seem to be weird choices. Don't get me wrong, they add additional unique edge to the game, but I found it just weird how two unimportant characters and a villain got more backstory than any other character in the game. I get it, this game is older, but I do look forward to seeing the games in the rest of the series hopefully flesh out the characters just a little bit more. I'm not going to lie, I've also found these past few dungeons tedious as hell. There was absolutely no need to warp us out for a dramatic effect of Talk Tower. It feels as if they were just honestly padding at this point, just to make the game time just a little bit longer. The final destination is Scand. It's time to defeat the Emperor and put a stop to the Dark Dragon Clan. First things first, we are going to get all of Ryu's dragon's abilities. By fishing at certain points and gathering armor, we can make our way to all the shrines. I have no idea how in the hell you were supposed to find these without a guidebook or a walkthrough. I broke my walkthrough rule at this point because I knew I needed to get the true ending for my retrospective. In order to do that, we need Agni. He is located in the cave where we got the water for Romero. With that out of the way, let's make our way back to Scand and climb the top of the tower to fight the Emperor. However, the elevator is broken, but a man had just used it and taken the parts back to Spring. We can talk to the man in Spring, take the parts to Gant and get it fixed to head back to Scand and make our way back up the elevator. The Emperor congratulates us on making our way here, transforms into a dragon and fights us. With the defeat, he tells us to build a world for a new era of dragons, and the ground collapses below us as we plunge into the depths of the dungeon. There, Sarah congratulates us and asks Ryu to give her the keys, which he does. Turns out she's been working with Jade all along, and now they're in his possession. Sarah tells us he plans to use them to get to Agua Tower and reawaken the goddess and throw the world into chaos. She's been mind-controlled by Jade, so her bidding was not of her own. Making our way to the top of Agua Tower, we can enter the Dragon's Shrine. Eventually, Sarah appears fighting us, unable to stave off Jade's influence. Ryu and the party are able to overcome her dragon form, and Ryu says goodbye. Once we arrive at the top of the tower, Jade has already begun the process of reawakening the goddess. A pagoda appears on the island to the north, and this is where the entrance to the goddess realm lies. With our destination in mind, we just need to find a way to get inside by talking to the old lady and the old man who enjoys weapons. The old lady gives us a weapon. She's not sure what this does. By talking to the old man, we learn that this is actually a special claw device that lets Mogu create a hole to get into the pagoda. Climbing the pagoda, we're finally able to make our way to the top, defeating Goda, the last of Jade's generals. Now all that's left is for us to face off against Jade himself. Jade espouses some nonsense about this being predestined, and after his defeat, our last target is Tyr herself. She will not attack you, but you can attack her. The goddess plays innocent after the fight. I haven't done anything wrong. Sarah appears telling you not to fall for her lies, telling you to use the power of Agni to defeat the goddess. I was a bit let down by the final boss here, especially for the era. While I'm sure you could make some long drawn-out challenge for yourself in order to get the game's true ending, you have to use Agni. With 999 HP, a shit ton of cures, Tyr only being able to deliver a total of 100 damage at most, this was one of the easiest boss fights in history, which was a major letdown. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad it wasn't 0 mislevels of difficulty from Final Fantasy IV, but I was expecting it to put up a little bit more of a fight. With Tyr defeated, the world is turned to normal, and now the restoration of the world can begin, after all the devastation the Dark Dragons caused. Before Nina and Ryu return home, they see their fellow friends safely back to their own villages. With the credits rolling, a screen pops up saying, "To be continued." The story of Breath of Fire is pretty simple, as there isn't a whole lot of complexity to it. However, that doesn't mean that there isn't anything to talk about. Many of the common tropes and archetypes we find across stories from almost all cultures find their way into Breath of Fire's story. First off, Ryu fits nicely into the archetypical hero's journey. The young orphan who is chosen to save the world, or bring peace to the world if you will. This heavily reflects the early stories of Hercules, Perseus, or Moses, each of which are ancient figures that all follow the same archetypical hero's journey. However, it is in the Bible, more specifically the New Testament, we can find many parallels to Breath of Fire. For starters, let's dive into the Book of Revelations. It is prophesied 4 horsemen will appear, one riding a red horse symbolizing war, another riding a pale horse symbolizing death, the other a black horse symbolizing famine and pestilence, and lastly representing conquest or the Antichrist himself. The Red Horseman is easily identified since the whole world of Breath of Fire is at war with the Dark Dragon clan. The Black Horse is mirrored by the 2 villages of Tantar and Tuntar, as well as Romero, and the 3 of the villages stripped of resources. Tantar and Tuntar have no water and soil, and Romero can't grow anything, plus those pesky zombies and animals. The third is Death, a pale horseman. What comes with war, pestilence, and famine? Well, death. This is also very easy to spot. But what about the White Horse? Well, it could definitely be argued that the Dark Dragon seeking to conquer the world could be the White Horse, but it could also represent the goddess herself. The goddess Tyr is the true villain of Breath of Fire. This is to say, she is the one who orchestrated the whole thing. It's her that keeps the cycle alive. It's the constant battle between good and evil. When an evil appears in the world, a force for good always appears in almost what always seems to be a group of people, sometimes a nation of people. This is to say, a balance exists in the world, and it goes back to the Asian symbol of yin and yang. and how a counterbalance of each other needs to be enacted for the worlds to remain in unison. Breath of Fire is nothing more than a giant allegory for the perpetual cycle of war that has plagued mankind since our inception. As long as human desire exists, so too does the will of the goddess. There is a flip side to the coin though, something in Breath of Fire that could almost go unnoticed, and that is the dragon that appears all over the game. I'm unsure of what to call this. For the sake of simplicity, let's call it the Dragon God. There is also a slight Gnostic undertone to the story that permeates throughout. The goddess Tyr most likely represents the idea of the demiurge, the false god of the material world. Much like the demiurge represents itself a benevolent god, it's the demiurge that keeps the perpetual cycle of war going by keeping the desires of the material world alive. In Gnosticism, it's the demiurge that keeps people stuck in the material world, unable to achieve true gnosis or knowledge. The dragon god represents the knowledge, or the entity that gave them knowledge by breaking free from the constraints of the material world, allowing us to return with the monad. Sarah hints at this as much by telling Ryu to use the final form of Agni against Tyr in the final fight. Agni is basically supposed to be Satanel for Gnosticism, which is the Gnostic version of Lucifer. What was even more striking about this was how alien Tyr looked in the final battle, almost otherworldly, as if her true form didn't belong in the world of Breath of Fire. Agni, Ryu's final dragon form, is needed in order to achieve the true ending. A quick look into Google of how to obtain Agni led me down a rabbit hole I wasn't quite expecting thanks to Google's AI. Agni is a yoga position that oddly enough means Breath of Fire. Yep, the titular title itself. According to the definition, it says Breath of Fire is a rapid, rhythmic breathing technique used in Kundalini Yoga, which I probably just butchered. I'm sure you guys will let me know down below in the comments section for that pronunciation. I am so sorry. It involves short, forceful inhalations and exhalations with the abdomen moving in and out like a bellow. Agni is also the name of the Hindu god of fire. While I certainly enjoyed my time with Breath of Fire, I don't think it's anything to write home about. If you're looking for an old-school JRPG to fulfill that retro itch, you could do much better. I'd imagine you could do much better in its own series and find a better entry to play. Breath of Fire is best observed as an entry point that started the series and watching over time how it grows into something genuinely special over time. However, I think going into it with the right expectations and realizing it for what it is, it does hold some old school nostalgic fun. It's clear Capcom was clearly trying to take a look at what Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy were doing and said, let's make our own RPG. The story and characters are nothing to write home about, as it keeps things pretty simple, but simple story can sometimes take you a long way, and I enjoyed the characters and story for what they were. I look forward to seeing how the rest of the series evolves over the course of the next 4 games. I'll be breaking away from Breath of Fire to cover a couple of other RPGs I've been itching to make videos on. Next time we cover Breath of Fire, we'll be taking a look at the second entry. If you haven't done so already, hit subscribe, ring the bell notification so you never miss a video when it goes live. If you want to help out the channel, liking and sharing goes a long way as it tells the YouTube algorithm you want to see more content just like this. Be sure to tune in every Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday to catch us live playing games we aren't making retrospectives on. If you find yourself in a position to support the channel, you can do so via YouTube or Patreon. It would be greatly appreciated. Doing so will net you 2-day early access to my retrospectives and updates of my playthrough and names in the credits. Stay safe out there. Stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out.